we are working on a Raptors chapter Impulsor, weathering it all up here. And the front side's pretty much done. What I'm using is basically just, so far I've been using a Streaking Grime here by MIG. AK also makes one that would work just fine. And then next I'm going to be going over it with Dark Streaking Grime, which is kind of a greeny color, to be adding a little bit more color variation to it. But you can see that the front here has all the streaking on it, whereas the side doesn't, so it's kind of flat looking. Whereas here, we've got all these streaks, and we've got the shading and griminess to it. I'm not really concerned with it being a little bit shiny right now. That's just because it's still wet. That will dry over time and go away. Plus, you can always matte coat it afterwards, and that'll really get rid of it all. I'm just getting into a lot of the nooks and crannies that might accumulate a bit of grime and dirt, and or that I want to have a bit more shadow to them. Because like I said, that's his very dual purpose. It's both adding a dirt and grime layer like you could use with a wash, but also adding shadow for the green. So pretty happy with the front for now. We're going to come back to it in a little bit when that's been dried and add a second color. How about we start on the top side? I'm just going to start going around the different elements where I want to have some shading. Oops, we got a little drop there, that's fine. Anywhere that we want to be darker. I'm working it like a panel line wash. Around the edges here. Let's clean that out a bit, we'll use that. And going around any raised areas or any rivets or anything like that. As grime likes to hold itself in edges and corners. It doesn't need to be super tidy again because we are going to clean it all up as we go. Some of it I'm just adding so that I have a spot to pull from when I start streaking it. Because when I streak for the top, it's all going to go front to back. So if I want to be able to pull it from towards the back here, then I need to have a line at the front to pull from. So that's why we end up putting a bunch on that front leading edge, and that's going to blend out. Okay. This looks pretty messy right now, but it's going to clean up just fine, just like the front did. Started the same way. We're going to put a little bit of a streak there following that crack. So the inside here we're going to put a little bit less because it's going to be a little bit cleaner because you can close the hatch, but it's still going to be a little bit grimy. Just because otherwise he's going to look a little bit out of place with the rest of the army. If he's perfectly clean. Even if it would make sense. The only reason I really did the open hatch was just to add a little bit of variety. I think it looks a little bit more impressive with an open hatch. A little bit more challenging to build and paint than if it doesn't have it. That's the reason why I did that. Okay. So I think we're pretty good with that on the top now. I might have to touch it up in spots as I go. But we're going to start blending that all in now. I'm just sort of feathering it. Again, I'm not super concerned with it being nice and tidy. It blends pretty smoothly on its own without too much work. The main thing is I don't want to have harsh tide line edges, kind of like right here. I don't want that, so I just need to blend it in a little bit better. And we even have a little bit too much color there, so I'm going to take a bit of that out. And we're going to pull it and put in some streaks here. So yeah, if I get a little bit too much here, I can always just sort of erase it. And then I can move it somewhere else if I want a little more in another spot. Or I can just wipe it off my brush. I can actually pop this piece off entirely. It's not glued down, so I can add a little bit more onto this front edge a little bit more easily here. We're going to let that dry for now. I might move it around a little bit more afterwards. Just using really small amounts here, being tidy. Because I don't want to have to try and clean it up too much here, but I just want a little bit more shading. One thing I do need to be careful of is that I don't get it on any of my window lenses, because it will tint them, and I don't really want to do that if I can help it. Even though they would get dirty too, I want them to still pop. I want the contrast there. So this tank has magical technology of some sort that keeps the lenses all perfectly clean at all times. Alright, so I've got the front, and I've got the top kind of in there now. Top doesn't get as much streaking, but that's okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Dark Streaking Grime here, and this one's the bluey green color, which works well because our main color is green. You take a finer colored brush, or finer tipped brush rather, and we're going to, rather than putting it on as a thick wash and then blending it all out, we're going to put some in specific spots basically, and then streak it straight down. And it just adds some interesting color variation, because if everything's just monotone, the exact same brown, it ends up looking a little bit plain. So if we add in a second color, it just makes it a little bit more visually interesting. It's very subtle, but I think it makes a difference. So this is more, for specific spots of streaking. But with the other wash, just like with the other wash, I can clean it up. So if I put down, if I go like this and make something a little bit too wide and thick, a little bit messy, I can just get the enamel thinner on my brush, and I can actually then just sort of taper and blend it back in. And once that dries, that's going to be basically invisible. And with these sort of specific streaks, I like to often go in where the chips are and use that as a place to start, and then just a little line straight down. And it's true, it hides a lot of the highlighting I already did on all these chips, but that's the complete look. And like I said, this blue-green is very subtle in the addition, but it does add just some more visual interest. I want it to be subtle, that's why it's the greeny color, so it kind of blends in a little bit with the base color. There's a spot there. Made a mistake, made a little bit too heavy. So we're just gonna blend that out. I'm using a finer brush for this part as well than I was on the other, because I just want these sort of sharp little daggers edges. So that's significantly different already from where we started. So we've got the front now, compared to the side, which is perfectly clean. Huge difference. So we're going to go onto the top and start adding in this sort of greeny color now up there into some choice locations. Again, super subtle, but it does add a little bit to the overall effect. I'm not happy with how some of this is dried on the front here. It's a little bit too thick. So we're going to take the enamel thinner on the brush and just sort of try and blend that in a little bit better, especially the edges of it, just to make it a little thinner looking. That's a little better. Okay. There we go. There we go. Most of the top done. Add a little bit of the green streaks here. Go back a little bit of brown. Yeah, just clean up this spot a little bit more. Alright, looks like we're pretty good with the top and the front, so we got the front now is weathered, and the top is, the sides are not, and the back is not. The back doesn't have a whole lot to it, other than I guess the inside. So we're going to start off on one of the sides. Going back to the brown. A little bit of grime is going to definitely sit in the bottom there. I don't mind going a little bit heavier. Plus, again, any of these parts that are like bright white, like the decals, I really want to tone them down a little bit. So I'm happy to put things on a little bit thicker where the decals are, and just to turn them to be more of an off-white color. It's a little bit harder to determine where you need to put it when you've got like no clear defined edges or anything, but I'm going to put it at the top here just so I can move it around later. Just add a bit of shadowing. And we can put it on the black as well. It doesn't show up very much on the black, but I'll put a little bit there. And it'll help tint that color a little bit anyways. On larger panels, sometimes I need to just add some spots and usually put it on top of the chips and pull from there. Because if I try and pull just from the top, it won't make it all the way, so I need to have some other sort of points that I can pull from. Because we've got a nice panel line here, I'm just going to follow the whole panel line down and just put it because I wanted to fill that later. Tend to put it on the poles too, right whenever there's a raised area, just on either side, just to add a little bit of depth. Because like I said, it works as a shade as well for adding some really easy shadowing and adding depth. not going to do the track stall right now just because I need somewhere to hold, because I don't really like holding the bass all that much. So holding onto the tracks is just the easiest spot. So I'm going to worry about those later. Alright, I think I've got that side pretty messy. I'll do this half the back as well right now because it's such a small area. Put a little bit on the bench seats here. Not going to worry about really the inside, maybe just a little bit right on the edge, but the inside is going to be relatively clean. I might do a bit on the floor as well, actually, but yeah. Just to show some mud's been trampled in. No, that's pretty much that for the back. So the side here again, it's all super messy now. Got these thick lines all over the place of the wash, but because we used an enamel wash using the odorless enamel thinner, allows us to reanimate it and push it around, and it doesn't damage the color underneath because that's all acrylic paint. So we're using an enamel thinner on an acrylic paint and it has no effect, which is perfect. And again, it doesn't matter if that brown's gone a bit dry, because we have a working time of like an hour or two. If I try and reanimate it tomorrow, it'd be too late. It will be pretty stained on there. But if I let it dry now, that's fine. It actually makes it easier to work with. It gives me more control, because when I get a little bit of it wet, it won't travel across all of the area that's already wet. Okay, I'm gonna leave it at that for now. We're gonna let that dry, and then I'm gonna probably finish it up on my own time here. But there's sort of 2.5 sides done, and we're taking it from this plain grain here without any real depth to it to this nice heavily weathered and grimy and dirty here, and all that was used for that is just these two, Streaking Grime and Dark Streaking Grime, as well as Enamel thinner to allow me to reanimate it and move it around. Anyways, thanks for tuning in.